Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this is the second to last session of the 102 stream. We have Joe Winchester with us, and he'll be giving us a really good presentation on Zowe and using it with open source tooling. Yeah, Joe, I don't know if you wanted to just introduce yourself quickly and then crack on. But are you happy with questions throughout, or should we save them to the end? What's your
Whatever
preference?
works. Yeah, I won't be able to monitor the chat while I'm heads down demoing.
That's
but
fine. I can do that.
If you see something, yeah, just give us a holler. And
no worries.
I guess
Yeah,
everybody's muted when they join, but they can always request to be unmuted if we have a really great discussion or something. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, so I'll keep an eye on the chat for us, Joe, and then yeah, if I see any questions, I'll find a gap. I'll try not to interrupt you too much, and if there's any towards the end as well, obviously people feel free to just chuck them in the chat and we can answer them at the end as well, so it's not a problem. But yeah, after you, Joe, if you wanted to
yeah, no worries. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah,
Thank you.
So this is session 6P, and there's a little thing here, and if you can give feedback, there's a bit at the end. Anyway, I really appreciate feedback every time I present. So if I'm speaking too quickly, if I don't say anything, if you don't feel like you're getting what you want out of the session, don't be shy, post something in the chat. I've been on some other sessions this week at GSE, and it's been really nice where sometimes somebody's asked a question and actually another subject matter expert has come in with an answer, and it's become more of a dialogue. Okay, so where are we at Zowe? That's my rough agenda. I'm going to sort of stick to that. I'm going to cover a little bit of the background, and I'm going to crack on Zowe's sort of three biggest components, or the three ones that I see most traction with at customers. First thing I want to say is that I work for IBM, which is great, but Zowe is a Linux Foundation project. So Zowe is owned and managed by the Linux Foundation. Some customers I talk to about open source and the mainframe, especially when it comes to things like security, they're very worried about installing or operating open source software alongside or even on a mainframe environment, on a mainframe LPAR, because they're naturally very risk averse. And there's a lot of headlines about, vulnerabilities and, data breaches and so forth. Just to reassure people, the Linux Foundation looks after Linux, which is the operating system created by sort of Linus Torvald and all those kind of legendary open source engineers. That's actually the backbone of things like Microsoft, Azure Cloud, and AWS actually run Red Hat Linux. But it's also where Jenkins, Linux Foundation is a Jenkins is a Linux Foundation project. So with Kubernetes and Helms, lots of very important things about cloud container orchestration, Node.js, which is a runtime server, which runs over half of the internet traffic now will go through Node servers. So just to give you a feeling of comfort that Zowe is in good hands, the Linux Foundation does a lot of stewardship and a kind of guardianship of the Zowe project, about making sure that all of our software that's released is continually tested, continually integrated. We run scans, static scans, dynamic scans. So we're always, nothing is ever 100% watertight. It would be arrogant to say that, but just to give you the feeling that we're not some sort of, kind of fly-by-night project where we just stuck a bunch of stuff into a GitHub repo under an open source license, and we're going to sort of, walk away or somehow introduce bad things. Zowe.org is the homepage to find everything you need to about Zowe, everything I've missed or everything extra. I've got a little embedded video here. I won't play it for too much, but if you go to Zowe.org, you'll see that we this embedded video is not working. All of our projects are listed. We have links to how you can keep in touch. We have Slack channels where you can keep in touch. We have Medium, where a lot of our engineers and now we're getting more people from the community are contributing. All of our documentation is online. So Zowe.org is where you want to go if you're ever lost. Zowe is an open source project, and it's a platform, and it's an extensibility. So when Zowe was first started, there were three design keywords we wanted to make: open, simple, and familiar. So we wanted to make a platform that was open source, open for anybody and everybody to join and participate in. Simple, because that was a sort of challenge, a perception of mainframe or IBM Z, was it wasn't very simple to operate. It required a steep learning curve. Some customers say, it takes like 5 years to train a sysprog. And something I heard recently was, and this is a familiar, I was talking to a CEO of a company, a mainframe company, and said he wanted his mainframe department to mingle more. And what he meant was he had a very large distributed, Linux community running Jenkins, CI/CD tool chains, languages like Python, for non-mainframe provisioning, and when, non-mainframe automation. And he wanted that team to be able to operate the mainframe and vice versa. He wanted people learning mainframe skills at his company to be able to be interchangeable. And it just creates you're a richer individual when you, when you know more. You become what you call a T-shaped person rather than a sort of I-shaped person. So I have a mobile phone. I'm just going to wave it in front of you here. It's new. It's lovely. I'm falling in love with it. It's new iPhone 14. But my son has one as well. We have very different phones. When we both got our phones, they both had the same basic software on there. So they have a compass and they have a calculator, simple things like that. Mapping software. But then it diverges. Then they have the App Store. I download things to do with my world, which is running, cycling, astronomy, kind of nerdy stuff like that. And my son downloads things to do with his world, which is sort of TikTok and table tennis and things like that. So you've got to have a good base platform. So Zowe delivers a lot in the base, but one of the proudest things about Zowe is it's extensible. And here are some quick numbers. So Zowe is extended by 9 different software vendors, and they can certify that the extension that they've got works with Zowe. And if you go to zowe.org/extend, you'll see a list of them all. And it covers everybody from, there's Micro Focus there, which is nice, and ASG, there's a few Phoenix, and then Broadcom and IBM and Rocket, who are the companies that commit the most code and time to Zowe, obviously have the most number of products that can extend Zowe. In terms of numbers, I'll talk about the Zowe command line interface first. Very popular. We track its downloads from npmjs.com, and it's been downloaded 187,000 times. That's a lot of times. I'll also talk about the Zowe Explorer for Visual Studio Code, about 80,000 downloads. And even our ZOS component, which I'll talk about towards the very end, has had about 6,000 downloads. So that's over about a 3-year period. Okay, so 3 components: the command line interface, Visual Studio Code plugin, and our Zowe desktop. There is more componentry towards this as well from a technical point of view, but this is really much the usability. Now, for the Zowe command line interface, if it's okay, I'm going to switch straight to a demo. I do have a lot of charts. Actually, I'll go, but with these embedded within them, what I'm going to demo, but I will just rather demo. So a command line interface is interesting. I remember the first time that I presented the Zowe with colleagues from Rocket and Broadcom and others, or CA they were called it back in the time, I think 2018 probably, 2019 possibly. We almost got booed out of the room by people saying a command line interface isn't modern, it's primitive. And there's an element of truth in that, but I'm looking at my MacBook now, and my MacBook offers me a Finder, Windows Finder, where I can find files and I can do renaming of files and move things between directories. But I'm much more powerful if I'm in a terminal and I start typing out commands like pwd for print working directory, or chutag, chmod, and I start writing commands and piping and grepping and setting and constructing shell script. If you're a Windows user, you might construct batch script. You're more powerful when you're doing that. So for an IT professional, a command line interface is generally how we interact with things. So Git has a desktop client, but most interactions with Git servers come from people typing commands at their command line, like git clone, git push, git pull, git fetch, and so forth. The same is true with Docker. Docker has a desktop client. But most Docker users are running things like, Docker build and, Docker image start and things like that. Yeah. And the same is true with AWS and other, cloud providers. There's something very nice about just being able to type out commands to interact with your mainframe. So if I'm the user on the left and I'm on my MacBook, which is me taking that persona today, and I don't know the mainframe's world, I want to interact with the mainframe. This is where Zowe comes in, okay? Zowe's installed the Zowe client on my desktop. I'm interacting with my mainframe. Zowe has core capabilities and extensions. Now I'm just very quickly gonna bring up a terminal and I'll show you what I mean by that. I can drag it in. And something's not quite worked about that. Come on. It's playing. Come on. Sorry about this. What's gone wrong? I might have to.
Are you sharing that screen, or are you maybe just sharing the because you can share the monitor, or you can share the.
What can you see now, Chris? Can you see my?
I can see your. Is that a notepad? It just says Joe Winchester at Joe MacBook Pro new.
Yeah, it's not very sophisticated, is it? It's because I've got desktop 1 and desktop 2.
That's
running.
it. Yeah.
Oh,
You can switch there you go. Oh no.
No, one more time. Once more. Let me do desktop 1. It's bizarre. I've not had this before. 1 second, I'm going to stop sharing and start sharing again. Super apologies for this. Let me do meeting, start share. Desktop 1. Share. How weird is that? It's like Zoom has just kind of malwared me. Is that a technical expression? Anyway, you can sort of see my desktop, can't you?
Yeah, I can see your desktop now. Yeah, if you're typing. Yeah.
Terminal. It's bizarre. I've lost the top of my terminal. Okay, all right. I'm so sorry about this. So sorry. So here I am at my laptop. PWD, this is my laptop, and I've installed the Zowe command line interface onto this. Now, the first thing you'll see about Zowe is you just type the word Zowe. Zowe is self-describing. So when you don't know the command syntax, it will always prompt you for the Zowe language, I suppose I could call it. So let's do something very simple. Let's look at some file, the dataset file system, find a piece of JCL, and submit it. And we're just going to riff on that for about 5 minutes. So I can see that I can do lots with Zowe files. I can do Zowe files, I can do jobs, logs, phenomenal amount of base function. I happen to have installed some extensions for DB2, IMS, Kix, MQ. I've got some other products here. These happen to be IBM products. I work for IBM. There's a lot of other, we saw earlier, a lot of other great extensions I can get for things like Endeavor or EJS or BMC APIs are available as well. So let's do Zowe files. Now, because I've told it I'm going to do Zowe files, it already is narrowing the syntax down or widening the syntax for what I can do with files. So huge amount of things I can do with files. So Zowe files list, remember, let's just do a simple kind of like an ISPF 3.4. So Zowe files list. Then it says, well, what do you want to list? I particularly want to list a data set. So Zowe files list DS. Now I'm not quite sure. I want some syntax help. So I do -H after any command, and it gives me sample commands. So I can see I can list data sets. I can list data sets with or without attributes. I can throttle it. So Zowe files list DS winchj.star. That's my user ID. And it's going to give me some dataset members. That's kind of like an ISP of 3.4. It's read the catalog. I can see I've got some JCL, winchj.jcl. Now I want to list the members. So Zowe files list. So Zowe files list all members is called AM. So Zowe files list AM. All of these things, they seem to always, it's a kind of, must be a Zoom's law. Wherever you want to type your WebEx or Teams or whatever, or Zoom, decides it wants to put some kind of like desktop clutter there. So we're going to list a bunch of dataset members. Oh, Zowe files list am. What did I do wrong? winchj.jcl. Sorry about that. 404. Zowe files list ds. Sorry, maybe my network connection has gone wrong. Okay, so I'm gonna not refuse to fix this. When I get stuck, I always go Zowe --HW for help web. What this does, and it's just on another screen, I'll drag it in. This opens a really nice little kind of in a web browser, but it's not a web server, it's /users. It's another way to look at everything. So I'm going to type the word member, and it says Zowe files list all members, and I can see the syntax. So Zowe files list all members. Okay, so if I copy that, in theory, so this is a good way to not get the syntax wrong, and I'm going to paste that in, and I'm going to literally swap winchj.jcl in there. And I can see I didn't know what my mistake was before, but it's just a nice way to sort of get help. You can see the syntax and browse it. Okay, here's one called copy job. Now later on I'm going to show opening this, but if I want to look at the contents of that piece of JCL, I'm just going to go Zowe files download. I happen to know it's called download ds winchj.jcl copy job. Now it's going to download that file for me, and it's going to store it locally. So what I'm going to do quickly now is show you what that file does. I'm just going to cat it. And it's a very simple file that takes a member called from, and it copies it to a member called to. You can see I've already run it this morning, so I already have my other member there, but I'm very quickly going to do Zowe files. I think it's called delete. Let me just delete that one. Zowe files delete ds. Zowe files delete ds winchj jcl2. Let me just delete that member. Just want to clean things up a little bit. Oh, I have to do a -f because I'm saying that I really do want to delete it. It's saying, are you sure you don't want to delete it? Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to submit that JCL to run. Okay, now when you submit a JCL, it goes straight onto the input queue. So what you'll see, let me just go back here, just in case I've forgotten the syntax for doing a submit. Submit. I can see I can submit a job. I could submit jobs in a local file, a data set, standard in. So I get the syntax for submitting a job, Zowe job submit data set. So I'm just going to copy that to my clipboard. winchj.jcl.copy job. Now, what you'll see is it instantly comes back the response. The job submitted very quickly. We got a response back telling us it was on the input queue. It hadn't even become active yet. A very common scenario. So that's asynchronous, right? We now have to wait for that job. So if you're doing things like chaining scripts together, the next thing you might want to do is you might want to wait until that job is finished. Now, Zowe provides all of that for you. That's one of the real value, the sort of USP. So if I look at all of the syntax for this and start scrolling up, it's quite rich. I've got wait for output. So let's run that again. --WFO, wait for output. Let's have a look here. Submitting job, waiting for it to enter output, and it came back. That was quite a quick job. So that's quite nice. Let's do another one as well. Now I want to download the output of that. So it's called VASC for view all spool content, is another little thing that we have available for us. We get that from the help. View all spool content. Now, if we look at that, hopefully you can see it. It says Zowe waiting for job, retrieving spool content, and then we have the output back. This is good. So now I might say, well, I wonder how long that job took. So now I'm running the output, and now I'm piping it, and I'm grepping the word time. So from my MacBook, I'm able to run issue one command with output that's doing quite a little bit of mainframe orchestration, running it, waiting for it, getting the output back. But then, and here's the beauty of it. I can pipe it and grep it on my laptop. So it's always possible to SSH your way into a mainframe environment, right, in a Unix shell, and you can run commands from there. But if you want to start mingling that software, coming back to that mingle thing with other software like Jenkins or other tools, like I have grep running under Bash on my MacBook, all of that software has to be running on the Unix system services, right? All of that has to be ported to the mainframe. You're in the mainframe's world. Whereas if you're in your laptop's world, or this could be an automation server or a Jenkins server, or it could be a cloud, it could be running in Azure or AWS or something like that, and you're running all of this inside some other provisioned machine, and you want to go from that machine to do something on the mainframe and then come straight back. This lets you do that, and that's its real USP. That's its real value proposition that it has. Okay, so I'll switch back to my presentation really quickly because come on, be nice to me. I think it's desktop too. I think it's actually PowerPoint that's messed everything up for me today. Why has PowerPoint messed everything up? Escape, 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 escape. PowerPoint. And sorry about this. Yeah, something about PowerPoint and Zoom have just decided that they're not going to play nice this morning. So I'm just going to stop share and reshare my PowerPoint just for a second, because there was something that I wanted to show you all. PowerPoint. I'm just going to quit PowerPoint actually. So sorry about this. I'm just going to open PowerPoint again. So, okay, we've seen how we can run commands. I've got that little video shows the commands that can run. This is what I'm able to do now is if I am a developer writing some shell script, for example, I have two children, they're 25 and 20 years old. They both know how to write shell script. They do not know how to write TSO or Rex or JCL. They didn't learn that at school. They learned how to write shell script just through various projects at school or their A-levels and things like that, or their degrees. So this is a piece of shell script that can run, that says, rather than me hard coding my data set names, for example, I'm substituting in a variable. I'm saying Zowe files list data sets. I'm not hard coding it. I'm selecting which system I want to connect to. I can talk more towards the end about how do you specify the system that you're connecting to and you authenticate. There's a number of ways there that support everything from having your user ID and password be persistently stored in your key store on your laptop, so secured securely, but it's still a persistent password, towards multi-factor authentication, towards an X509 client certificate, which is a more advanced way to authenticate. Now, I can get the response format in JSON, or that was something that I didn't show, but perhaps I could have. Let me do Zowe files, jobs, submit jobs, VSC. Let me do wait for output. Let me do RFJ. On any request that you issue, if you want to start doing that programmatically, you can get the response back in JSON, and JSON is very nice if you're then going to pipe that to some other library to start breaking it down and analyzing it, not as just flat text. So that's quite nice. So what they've done here is they've got the response back in JSON, then they piped it to the jQuery library. jQuery is a phenomenal library, right? And then they've said, and they're basically getting a particular row out of this, seeing it whether it's got 0, running in a loop. Zowe files create dataset classic, right? So when you're new to the mainframe, if you have to be taught things like logical record lengths and fixed blocks and tracks and cylinders and stuff like that, it can be quite scary because you're used to Unix file system, which is just a streaming file system where you don't have to worry about stuff like that. So they just at Classic, we just encapsulated all of the things that say, I'm just going to create me a fixed block 80 because that's what JCL and lots of things lie. And then we're uploading it. And then what's quite nice here, we're submitting a job. It's actually roughly the same job. It's got a 5-second sleep in this job, which is quite nice, so we can see the delay. But instead of the JCL having to be in a dataset member, you can just pipe that in directly. So you can imagine that you've got Unix variables substituted in from higher up in the script, that you perhaps get the output of something of one system and you're grabbing it, constructing a piece of JCL, perhaps you're putting in some names, firing that straight off to the mainframe, coming back, submitting it, spinning in a loop. Okay, this is really where the Zowe command line interface really excels. Two other quick patterns I'd like to just cover on really quickly. One of the nice things that people do with my data set that I ran just there was hard-coded, right? It was hard-coded because I was hard-coded. Let me go back to my, looks like it's behaving a little bit nicely. If I go back to look at my data set that I submitted, I hard-coded the word from and I hard-coded the word to. One of the nice things that I've seen some customers do that they, let me just download another quick data set. I think I've got another one here, copy Palm. Oh, you can see I deleted that 2 member and it worked. Okay, Zowe files, download DS, winch.j, copy Palm. This is going to be a slightly different member. And what this one has got is the variables are not defined, right? It's ampersand source and it's ampersand target. And in fact, if I were to try and submit that to run, it would actually just break. Yeah. You know, I can do copy Palm, it's going to break. Yeah. Okay. Because it's badly formed JCL. I mean, we're waiting at some sort of return code, aren't we? JCL error or something like that. Yeah, JCL error. And that's because it doesn't know what we want to do. So what we can do now is we can actually, and I'll just play it on the video a little bit more. Yeah, JCL symbols. So what we're able to do is we're able to pass substitution data into the JCL symbols. So I can go JCL, let's go back here to remember the syntax, is --JCL --symbols, JCL --symbols, source equals target equals. So I can go source equals, well, I have a job called, I have a member called from, so I'm just going to copy that one. In my JCL, I can see target equals, I've just got a little blah or something like that. Yeah. So what that lets you do, and I've seen this very successful with customers, is they end up with, and I can just test that because if I actually go and list my members, I should see one called blah. You see the more experienced generation saying, we've got a piece of JCL that can do something clever, but it's currently hard-coded. They then might create 5 or 6 or 15 parameters to parameterize that JCL. And then the Unix crowd comes along and say, well, that's fantastic. You've given us that. And now we're able to pass in the parameters directly to basically drive that JCL in the way that we want to do. So that's very successful as a pattern. The other thing that is interesting is that sometimes people look at the Zowe syntax and they say, well, can you do things like issue a rackf command? Can you issue a, some look at a keyring or query a certificate or something like that? There isn't a REST API to let you do that, but we can do Zowe TSO issue command. I'm just going to issue the command called time. This time is really simple. It's just ask LPAR for the time of day. So because you can issue a command called time, you can do anything, right? So I'm going to issue the command called LU, and I'm going to do -SSM for suppress startup messages. So that's my startup message because it's logged me into TSO. You're going to see just a little bit of stuff about my user ID, which I can do, but and it's all running under my user ID. So you can see when my user ID was created and things like that. The other interesting thing as well about issuing commands is if I go back to here, if you're a Rex developer, Zowe files list ds. So I've got a Rex member, Zowe files list am. I've got a Rex data set. Let me show you how to run some Rex. I've got one called hello, Zowe files, download, ds, winchj.rex, hello. And just cat it, see what it does. I think I demoed this. Hi there, GSE user. It's real simple, just echoes it back to me. So what I can now do is I can do Zowe TSO issue command, open quote, exec, single quote, winchj.rex, hello. Okay. And I'm going to do -SSM because I don't want all the startup messages coming back from it. So what is it going to do? So this is what I call Zowe Unlimited. Because if you can write a Rex gives you access to anything and everything. It's 365 dimensional on the platform. What did I do wrong with that? Oh, real simple. I just forgot to close my brackets. It's just going to run that Rex member. So you can do more advanced Rex members that can do all sorts of clever things, clean up jobs, query statuses, run assembly routines and things like that. So you can remember that script beforehand when I was saying Zowe create member, dataset classic. If at some point in time the Zowe doesn't have a command to do that, but you have a skilled Rex developer or somebody with JCL, they can write that, parameterize that, and you're away to the races. And that's a really powerful extension pattern. Are there any? I'm going to pause for a second. Are there any questions on that? Steve, anybody ask a question? Or I'm also going to have a snack. I've got some quite nice chocolates next to me on my desk.
I can't see any questions in the chat at the minute, but
right.
yeah, keeping them an eye.
No worries. I'm not going to try and sell you Zowe because you're already here, but Zowe's popular. And I do see Zowe wins various awards and bits and bobs, and thanks to anybody who's ever voted for one. But one of the nice things that we have educators using Zowe. Comes as no surprise, my COBOL students are perplexed that they were introduced to Zowe too late. So we have lots of education things, teaching people with Zowe and people using it for DevOps. And anyway, I'm not here to sell for you. Just going to go on to the next. If you have MQ running, MQ is a very popular messaging system on ZOS, you can run MQSC commands. And I've got a little script. So if you look at that command, Zowe MQ run MQ, MQ21, define channel. So we're getting some quite involved things where we can define. I'm just going to fast, displaying channels. So we can connect to MQ. So for folks who aren't using this, previously it was quite difficult to run MQ commands on ZOS. You had to install kind of MQ on Windows, or you had to install the MQ client on the laptop of the machine that you wanted to run in. But again, think you're doing some automation, you submitted some jobs, perhaps you're starting a queue manager or doing something. Now you want to go and query that. You just chop and change. And by the way, Zowe supports SSO single sign-on. So if you are not using a long-lived password, but you're using some other authentication mechanism like out-of-band MFA, once you've got that token back, Zowe is able to basically let you seamlessly transition between these different backends. I think I put this, I think the last time I presented this, I think Colin was in the room and he said, I would cover MQ or something. Kicks, very, very, are there any Kicks people in the room, or maybe they're all over in the Kicks track? I'll just do a quick Zowe Kicks one. I'm in Hersley right now in the UK, which Kicks was created. So I can't know. You can do lots and lots of neat things with Kicks. One of the lovely things you can do with Kicks that I like, Zowe Kicks, get resource. You just query tables. You get all the data back, and you can start doing clever things as well. So I think you do RFF. I can just say I want the program, new copy count, I don't know, whatever status or something like that. So you can start querying the data, and you can skinny it, and you can say, I want it to go in a table format and things like that. And you can do criteria, program equals LG star. So you can run some very nice queries, and you build up automation. I must have made a mistake. Why is my program name not there? I can't spell again. Program. It sounds like a sort of. Anyway, here we go. But you can, and it's not just you can issue new copies and things like that. You've got a new copy. That's quite nice if you're building DevOps pipelines and things. Okay. We can issue DB2 commands. There's about half an hour on the CLI, so I'm going to stop there. But it really is popular and good. Next thing I'm going to talk about is Zowe Explorer, Visual Studio Code. So the CLI is one form factor for people who want to write commands and reach into 30 different products from lots of different vendors, all with authentication, shared, and reach into all these different backends. It rocks. It's written in JavaScript. And what's really cute is that the next scenario is the developer. And for that, I'm going to cover Visual Studio Code. And that shares an awful lot of the same code. Because even though this is TypeScript, which is Microsoft's compiled version of JavaScript, it uses the same libraries. And I am going to show a picture, but a demo speaks 1,000 pictures. So let me go straight to my demo mode. So for folks who have Visual Studio Code, which you just Google for download Visual Studio Code, hit this little tab here, type the word Zowe, and you will see the Zowe Explorer. It comes up as the number 11. And here we can see it. And you just hit the install button and magic happens. Now, if you've already configured your command line interface, it shares the same configuration. So I can connect to the same systems as the command line interface using the same authentication mechanisms. Are we still there? My screen just got a really horrible pause, Chris. Are we still there?
Still there. Yeah,
Sorry.
I've got some questions if you want some, or would you want?
Yeah, kick it. Yeah, I feel like a chocolate break. Go for it.
Yeah, okay. So I've got one question here from Neil Adamson. Which IDEs does Zowe have integrations for other than VSC? Okay,
VSC, Visual Studio Code. We have two in the Zowe project. We have Visual Studio Code and we have IntelliJ. Are the IDEs that we currently have. Now, the IntelliJ plugin, which is built by the IBA group in Prague, I believe that also works in other IDEs like PyCharm and things like that. So I hope that answers the question. But those are the two that we have. Now, Visual Studio Code can also run under what's called an Eclipse Thayer client inside a browser. So Visual Studio Code can also run in, and let's see if I can. So it's still Visual Studio Code, but I'm running. So Visual Studio Code is what sometimes people derogatory way call a fat client. I have to install it on my desktop. But as well as that, I'm running in vscode.dev. This is running inside Google Chrome. I don't know if you can see the subtle difference. So this is a thin client, vscode.dev. So Visual Studio, the Thayer takes a TypeScript code and basically is able to run it inside a hosted environment. And this is something else that's interesting as well. And this also runs in things like Red Hat Code Ready Workspaces, but that's an IBM offering, and I'm not going to push IBM down your throat. Does that answer? Hopefully it answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. And next one I've got is from Sam Davis. How/where is it managing the security for the kicks and MQ?
Great question. How/where is it managing the security for the kicks and MQ? So I'll start with kicks first, because that's the one I know most about. So within kicks, you have depending on whether the region is in a kicks plex or not, you configure a REST API, and it's called CMCI, Kicks Management Client Interface. So if you have the kicks department, lovely people just over the corridor from me, create a product called the Kix Explorer that runs inside Eclipse. And so if you can connect that to your region or regions, you will already have that TCP/IP service available. So you need to enable that TCP/IP service available for you. And then that can either be the management region for the Kixplex, what's called the Wowee server, that lets you reach into the CMAS and look at multiple Kix regions, or it can be what's called SMSS, which is a single managed Kix region. So you're connected in, and it's basically, you have to have, your TCP/IP service may have auth off, which I wouldn't recommend, in which case there's no security. But depending on how that TCP/IP service has been secured, the Kix region is the one that's managing the security for you. Okay, so it'll basically take that TSO user in that gets flowed in on the request and basically say, well, what authority does the person have access to? Okay. So, but if you look at Kix Explorer documentation, MQ uses the MQ console. So from MQ 9.5 onwards, I think, they had something called an MQ console. That's basically a really nice, web UI to let you do things like create queues and manage queue managers and stuff. Behind that web user interface is a REST API. It's a very well crafted one, so the server serves up the UI, but it also serves up the heavy lifting for the data at the back end. And what Zowe does is Zowe basically calls that at the back end. And again, so that's basically handled by that MQ, which is, I think, a WebSphere Liberty server. So again, that's just handled the same way. So however you've configured your MQ console, if you have security on, that security is on. And if you had security not on, your TCP/IP service was unauthenticated, then Zowe's basically hitting that same surface. Sorry, that was meant to be a short answer, but it lost me a little bit.
Thanks for that. And last question I've got in the chat is from Ivy Chan. If I need to explain to a business executive on what Zowe is, can I say that Zowe allows your developers to use their preferred tools to tell what the MF to do, but they don't need to know the MF language, nor do they need 5 years experience as a ZSysprog? Or do you have a less clumsy way to explain it?
That's perfect. As an IBMer, I wouldn't use that description, but I love it when other people do, because I would run foul of lights. I don't want to be ageist. I'm 56 years old. I work with 60, 70-year-olds. I could, walk down the corridor. We have 2 people over 75 working in the Kix department. They're the smartest, most wonderful people out there, and one of them uses the most modern tools, right? So it's not an age thing, but yes, it's an experience. The way I like to describe it sometimes, so I learned to play the piano. I was very fortunate. My parents played for piano lessons when I was younger, and I still get a lot of enjoyment out of playing the piano. I never learned to play any other instrument. I have a keyboard at home. I got it for my 50th birthday. When I want to play the cello, I just hit a button called cello, and I play the keyboard notes, and it sounds like a cello. And in fact, it's actually a sampled cello. It's not synthetic sound. It's actually quite an expensive keyboard. So I'm not a cello player, but I didn't learn to, make beautiful sound out of wood and horsehair. So once you've learned how to, yes, you don't need that on-ramp to learn each individual instrument. Cool.
And there's one other thing in the chat. It's not a question, but it's just a really nice statement from Donna Clark. Just got Zowe with VSC going at work. Having used it before, I got hired to learn mainframe via Z Explore. First cool trick was using our ISPF utility to create a CSV file from job search. Then use an extension to quickly edit it in VSC. Looking forward to gaining more facility with Zowe. So that's just a nice message from Donna.
Cool, thanks, Donna. Thanks. I owe you a tea or a coffee or a croissant or something if we're ever in the same place. Thank you so much. But you did touch upon that recent IBM Z Explore, and looking at the time, I slightly ran away with me. But yes, one of the things I'm old enough to remember when everybody was learning Windows 3.1 back in the 1990s, when it wasn't particularly good. And I'm not, but one of the reasons that Windows and Microsoft became so successful was because early professionals and early hires were just learning it in school and in university, and it was pre-installed and it was just so easy to use, even though it actually wasn't that good. Zowe is good, which is good, but we spend an awful lot of time trying to get it so that people doing IBM Z Explore, which used to be called Master of the Mainframe or Open Mainframe COBOL Education, or we saw Cameron CA, I showed earlier, East Carolina University professor. If we can get students and people, the sort of next generation of mainframers learning the mainframe with Zowe technology, it just becomes second nature for them. And they actually sometimes bring that into organizations, and we'll see experienced organizations coming to us saying, can you teach us about Zowe? All these kids want it installed. And that's great. And I'm sorry if I offended kids or older people there. It's not my intention, but I'm trying to paint a picture of people learning mainframe skills, learning it with Zowe. Cool. Very quickly, I'm going to switch, Chris, to this is a Zowe Explorer and VS Code I think we just talked about. I can search data sets very quickly. I'm going to do that same scenario. We've got a few minutes left for that. That's my job. Now, I'm just going to delete a couple of jobs. This is all quite, delete jobs. One of the interesting things about this is if I go into my file called from, hello, you beautiful people, today, Thursday, 9th of Feb. I can save my file and I can go into, here's my job, and I'm just going to submit my job. Now, when we submit the job, what we're going to see, and unfortunately, parked it over the screen. I've got a little hyperlink with the job name, and I click it, and there's my job name. So that's quite nice, is that we're effectively jumping from ISPF 3.4, doing a sub, going back to STSF, but it's all in line. The job you'll see has got syntax highlighting. That doesn't come as part of Zowe by default. I have an additional extension to do that. The additional extension I did to do that is called the IBM Z Open Editor. I'll very quickly disable it. I didn't want to push IBM, but there's another one from Broadcom as well. And if you have a look, I think Micro Focus have one as well. So that's one of the nice things about Visual Studio Code, is that you can grab, if you're working with a language like Node or Java or JCL or COBOL or whatever, an MVS language or USS language, the Zowe Explorer basically knows how to, how to open files, how to lock files, how to do code page conversion, all that great stuff. It knows the difference between a sequential PDS and another PDS, but we deliberately don't provide any more smarts about that. We leave that for you to basically get your sort of choice. You can choose the wallpaper that you want to do. So I happen to have, I'm just going to put my Zowe Explorer back in there quickly. My IBM Z Open Editor, enable. And in fact, it does it real time. It does recolor in real time. And that's got content assistant things. All of the things you would expect. One of my favorites is we've got allocate like. So if you find a data set that's got some, I don't know, it's 120 fixed block, whatever it is, you can do allocate like. That's a sort of create a new one, but empty based upon this old one. So you don't have to create new member. Upload members, very nice. Especially with Unix system services. If you ever try, a lot of time people are trying to transfer data from their laptop to the mainframe. And again, there's a command called Zowe files download DS. You saw me do it earlier. The Zowe files upload, download USS, upload USS. You can do here, and you're just pointing back to your file chooser, and that's quite nice if you want to transfer files across, and you don't have FTP available. By the way, nobody's asked me this question yet, but maybe you're thinking. So this is right now using ZOSMF's REST APIs on the back end. This also works with FTP if you don't have, or secure FTP if you don't have ZOSMF running. There's also a third option. If you're an IBM developer for Z customer, there's a remote starter task called RSED, Remote System Explorer Daemon. This can connect to that as well. Another quick thing I want to show you with this, I can create, I've got winchj.jcl, winchj.rex. That's quite nice, where if in your tree view, you've perhaps got some JCL that you're working with and some source code listings and something else, but the data sets aren't juxtaposed next to each other naturally, and you want to create that list so you can see them all. You can also as well, right mouse click, you can also say add to favorites, and then your favorites at the top are going to be, it's more kind of like a clipboard of completely disconnected things that you want to have together. Another thing that's nice that was added recently, the user.proclib. The user.proclib is quite big, but I've got user.proclib and I'm filtering for just the proclibs that start with the word Z. And I use this myself because Z is one of Zowe's prefix. So you can narrow down into just what you want to, which is quite tasty. Probably my favorite thing with the Visual Studio Code plugin is actually this, which is sort of our SDSF view. So I'm going to go into ZWE star, and I'm going to pull up a job, and I'll show you why I love this so much. If I let me just pull up an active job. Let me pull up this one. Oh, that's cancelled. Pull up this one, which is active. You go into the sysprint. So within SDSF, you can open this and you can PF8, PF7, PF11, PF12, find next. You know, you can play SDSF the same way a cello player makes a wooden box with horsehair. It sounds interesting. But if you're a piano player, if you're a Visual Studio Code player, and you want to switch to make it look like a mainframe, I'm here. And what I do, and in fact, I've been on 2 calls today with customers looking at Zowe. First thing I do is I get in and I type Control F, you know, ZWE, AD, happens to be a particular message I'm looking for, you know, and I can find all the currencies of it, or I can scroll right, I can scroll left, I can find the word, you know, error has occurred 1,000 times, or I can find gateways started. You know, you can navigate your way around this quite easy, quite simply. And you can even open the syslog if you want to, if you've got permission to do it. This is with active spool as well. SOSMF lets you, its API lets you look at active spool, so you don't have to wait for the job to finish. And that's quite nice. I certainly much prefer it to SDSF. You can also issue various commands from here if you want to. And if you're working with Unix system services, because you're dealing with Node or Java or something like that, this is pretty nice. It lets you, oh, I just have to specify a filter there. It lets you look at, you can open files. So I've got a YAML file, for example, and Visual Studio Code, out of the box, it knows what to deal with YAML. It knows how to deal with JavaScript and TypeScript and something like that. But if I perhaps had Java or Python or something like that, I could go and get extra plugins available from the marketplace, and you can sort of navigate your way around that world and right mouse click and copy and upload and various bits and bobs like that. Cool. Any questions on the Visual Studio Code?
Yeah, so we've got 2 questions from Neil Adamson. First question, can you allocate, like, and tweak the palms before the new file is created? So
great question, and I'm going to have to try that literally live. I'm not sure. I'm just not sure, but let's have a go. What a cracking question. Allocate like. So I'm going to call it winchj.jcl like. It looks like it didn't let you do it. Sorry about that. I can do show dataset attributes, which are the dataset attributes. One thing I can do though is if I just say, if I go up here to the very top and I say, I think I can do an allocate, create new data set, which is basically an allocate. I can create winchj.brand new, brandne, just to make sure it's not more than 8. And now I can do all of this. So now I can say data set partitioned, edit attributes, and I can do various bits and pieces like this. So what could I, you know, I can
make it the same, yeah.
Yeah, fixed block 80, FB. Anyway, you can do stuff like that. So I don't think you can, but it's great requirement. Yeah. So you can, yeah, you have to go back to square one and then just go your way through. Yeah. Cool. Good question. Thanks for asking.
And then the second question from Neil was, does Zowe access the same concatenation as you would build in TSO for things like Rex, etc.?
Yes. The answer is yes. Cool. Yeah. It does access the same concatenation. So, yes, it does. Yeah, it does. Which is actually interesting. I think there's a question behind that question, but I'm looking at the clock because I know how powerful that is. So if your concatenation has included other members and things, and your Rex program is calling other Rex programs, which I think is where you're heading with that question, then yes, it will access that concatenation, which means your Rex program can be calling other Rex routines. Yeah. Good question. Yeah.
Cool. And that's all the questions for the moment.
Yeah, I do a whole session on Rex actually, where I start reading, you know, doing some more advanced Rex, you know, reading the system log, and gosh, what other ones do I do? I've got ones where I get it to read the Jabberwocky poem back and stuff, but I won't But yeah, so one other quick thing really quickly, that we had a question about Kix. And just because I work on Kix, and I'm going to show you, we do have an extension for Kix. I showed a little bit of the Kix command line interface. And with the Kix extension, really quickly, you end up with, come on, work for me, work for me. Some of these systems, I tried them yesterday, they went up. Here we go. Here's a Kix region. I can go into a Kix region. I can look at programs. I can filter for programs. I've only got a few minutes left. I can right mouse click. I can new copy programs. I can phase programs in. So if you're a developer and you're writing COBOL and you submit the JCL and you now want to do a phase in or a new copy because you now want to change the version, or you want to look at your libraries, your RPL libraries or your libraries, work out where a program has been loaded up from. So that's a new copy count, and I can look at my attributes and I can look at my DSN. Oh, sorry, that's my phone ringing. I'll just ignore it from now. So you can see where things are coming from, and you can new copy and move libraries in and out of your DSN list and things like that. You can also look at web services and look at URI maps and TCP/IP services. And the idea behind that is you don't have to leave this environment. The world is more than just data sets, right? It's data sets that you compile in JCL, and then you have to get those deployed and run and do pipeline scans and things like that. Okay, so that's something that we're building out. And if you're a Kix developer, take a look, because it's kind of new, and we've only been developing that for a little while. Sweet, and I have basically run out of time. It's not to be expected because I'm having way too much fun. Jobs, Unix system services, cracking through what I basically did in the demo, Visual Studio Code, the Kix, this is a demo, IBM Z Explore. If any of you want to get hands-on with this, or if any of you want to get access to a mainframe and you can't for whatever reason, you can log into IBM Z Explore. And IBM Z Explore, this is probably Zowe's biggest success point. About 2 years ago, they pivoted from teaching people with green screen to teaching people with Visual Studio Code and the Zowe command line interface. They also teach Ansible and Python and lots of other great stuff as well. It's really good. And it's not just for students, it's not just for kids. I learn stuff each year doing IBM Z Explore, and the team that put this together are phenomenal. And you get hands-on with Linux One environments and things like that. And you can knock yourself out. And if you want to get more permission, so your user ID has a chat channel, and you can reach out, and you do actually, there are places where students can, if the administrators trust you and ask you a few questions, they can let you do more advanced things and even give you your own slightly bigger environments. There's the IntelliJ one, little picture behind that. One more very quick thing I wanted to touch on. The Node is a package manager language. So the package manager for the CLI and Visual Studio Code, anybody can use that for anything they want to. So if you're writing JavaScript code, this is JavaScript, you go constant await, create dataset session, create dataset type enum, dataset classic, constant. We have SDKs for Java, we have SDKs for Kotlin, SDKs for Swift. So you're not restricted. Somebody asked a great question earlier about IDEs. Let's say you wanted to create something for the Eclipse IDE, which is written in Java. Zowe doesn't have that right now because it's got a full market space. Kix, I think CompuWeb BMC have a plugin for that. We just decided not to build one. But if you wanted to, we have a Java SDK, a Java software development kit available. So you could actually grab that. But what people tend to do with these is they tend to build, they just build their own dashboards, especially the node.js. That's quite popular. People build their own dashboards. Chris, I'll be quiet now because I've hit the hour. I'll stop sharing.
That's fine. It's brilliant, Joe. I'll just give it 30 seconds, shall we, first see if there's any more questions come in, because it's been quite a nice interactive session. So we'll just give other people 30 seconds to a minute to see if there's any other questions coming in.
Cool. Sorry, I stumbled with the PowerPoint, Zoom, desktop one, desktop.
No, it's good. No, it's fine.
Issue.
You get these technical issues, don't you?
So if anybody wants to find out more, Zowe's an open source community. You go to zowe.org, and there's a big thing called staying in touch. If you're a user of Slack, we have a Slack workspace. I know not all people are users of Slack. If not, just find a way. Hit me up on LinkedIn or anybody from the community. We're always happy to jump on calls, and we even stick people on planes and trains to do site visits and things. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no questions at the moment, Joe. So we'll start to wrap it up. So I thank you for your presentation on behalf of everyone who I can't obviously unmute. Yeah, really well delivered. So thank you so much for that. And as Joe said, everyone at the start of the meeting, he obviously welcomes feedback. So there is I think you can do that through the agenda website as well. I think there's a link on there where you can provide feedback if you'd like to do that. Joe,
yeah, and don't complain if the room was too hot or too cold, because
yeah,
I've had, I mean, that's my idea of humor, but I've had people who feedback and they go, the room is too hot. And I'm like, dude, really? Just, take your jacket off, or just,
No, yeah, thank you so much for that, Joe. It was a brilliant session, and thanks everybody for joining us. That's great. We've got another session on the 102 at past, which is about virtualization as well, and that will be very interesting if anyone would like to join us for that one. But yeah, we'll wrap it up then. Thanks a lot, Joe, and thanks everyone for joining.
Cheers, Chris. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe.